Welcome everyone. Let's begin our lesson for today by going over the learning goals and success criteria. First, what are we learning? We're learning how to graph linear inequalities using slope and y-intercept, and we're learning how to use the correct line and shading for graphs of inequalities. How are we learning it? Through the Graphing Linear Inequalities Part 4 notes and the Graphing Linear Inequalities Part 4 assignment. When could you use this? To determine which scores you can receive on your final exam that will allow you to pass the course. How do you know you learned it? By getting a score of 4 on the Graphing Linear Inequalities Part 4 assignment. Now let's take a look at our agenda for today. We will begin by going over our learning goals and success criteria. While we do that, you'll fill out your Get It Started. Once you've completed your Get It Started, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. After that, we'll go over the Graphing Linear Inequalities Part 4 notes, and then I'll give you time to complete the Graphing Linear Inequalities Part 4 assignment on Desmos. Once you've completed the assignment, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. At the end of class, we'll go back over our learning goals and success criteria while you fill out your Before You Go. Your only homework for tonight is to continue working on the Systems of Linear Equations and Inequalities study guide and any incomplete assignments that you may have. Let's take a look at the Graphing Linear Inequalities Part 4 notes. Our notes begin with the learning goals and success criteria. Now let's take a look at how we graph linear equations before we get into inequalities. So when we graph a linear equation, the first thing we do is we pick out the slope and the y-intercept, and we're going to graph those points. So we plot the y-intercept, which in this case is -2, so I'm going to go down 2 and plot my point. Then I'm going to use the slope to plot the second point. So this tells me I'm going to go change in y of 1, so I'm going to go up 1. Change in x of 2, so I'm going to go to the right 2, so up 1 to the right 2, and I plot my point there, and then I connect the dots, and now I have a linear equation that's been graphed. Now how does this apply to inequalities? Well, with inequalities, we're going to graph them the same way. So just like we did before, we're going to plot the y-intercept, which in this case is -2, so I go down 2 and plot that point. Then I use the slope to plot the second point. Well, this is change in y, so we're going up 1 to the right 2. So we go up 1 to the right 2, plot my point, connect the dots, and now I have my line. Now the difference is we're going to shade where the y values are bigger than the line. So I'm going to look at the y-axis here, and I'm going to see where the line crosses, which is here, and I want all the y's that are bigger than that line. Well, they're all up here, so I'm going to shade that area up there above the line. So the shading is a new aspect of graphing that we need to consider. The other part is what kind of line to use. So similar to before where we talked about the open circle versus closed circle, same thing here. Every inequality gets a dotted line or an open line. Notice there, it's open because there's little spaces in between. So every inequality gets an open line or a dotted line. If they add more to the inequality, we do too, meaning if they add the bar underneath, then we're going to add to it and make it a solid line. So in this case, we have y is less than x. Well, I'm looking if they added anything extra, meaning that, did they add the bar here? If they didn't, which in this case they didn't, we'll leave it as it is and it stays as a dotted line. Now, here's an example of x is greater than or equal to 2. Now, they did add something extra. They added the bar here. So we'll add to it as well, and we'll make this a solid line or a closed line. So how does that apply to our inequalities? Well, when we graph these, we have y is less than 3/2 x. So we're going to plot the y-intercept first. Notice there is none listed here, so our y-intercept is 0. So I'm going to go here to 0 and plot my point. And my slope is 3/2, so I'm going to go up 3 to the right 2. So I go up 3 to the right 2, plot my point, and normally I would just connect the dots. But I need to check to make sure I have the correct line, which in this case, they didn't add anything extra, so I don't either, so it should be a dotted line. So there's my dotted line. Now I just need to shade it. So it says y is smaller than the line. So I'm going to go along my y-axis and find where it meets the line, which is here. And I want all the y's that are smaller. All of those are down here, so I'm going to shade everything on this side of the line. Let's look at another example. we have y is less than or equal to negative x minus 3. So again, I'm going to plot my y-intercept first, which is negative 3. So I go down 3 here. And my slope is just negative x, which really is negative 1. So that's negative 1 over 1. So that means I'm going to go down 1 to the right 1 and plot that point. Again, normally I just connect the dots, but I need to make sure I have the correct line. Well, they did add something extra, so we will too. So we're going to have a solid line. And now we just need to shade the graph. It says y is smaller than the line. So I'm going to go along my y-axis and find where they meet, which is here. And I'm going to look at all the y's that are smaller than the line, which are down here. So I'm going to go ahead and shade this area here. And that's how I graph the linear inequality. There's a video here that shows you how to check your work using Desmos after you've already graphed the linear inequality, so you can check it using Desmos. Let's talk now about how to check our work using Desmos when working with linear inequalities. So we're going to let Desmos graph linear inequalities for us so that we can check that against the work that we've done on our activities. So we're going to go to desmos.com and we're going to click on Graphing Calculator. And now we're going to go ahead and enter the inequality that we want to graph. So let's say it's y. Now to do the inequality symbols, we'll go down here to where it says keypad and click there. And here's all your inequality symbols. So let's say it's greater than or equal to. And then we can put in 3/2 x minus 5. And now it graphed the inequality for us. It shows the type of line right here and the shading. Now if it wasn't or equal to, we can see that it creates a dotted line, so it will create the correct type of line, and it will show the shading of where the shading should occur. So that's how you can use Desmos to check your work when dealing with linear inequalities. Let's talk now about how to sign in to Desmos to complete your work. So what we're going to do is you're going to click on the link to go to the assignment, and it should take you to a page that looks kind of like this. And right here where it says sign in with Google, we're going to click there. And it's going to pop up with our email accounts. You're going to click on your school email account, and it should already have you logged in because you should have already been logged in using Google Classroom. From there, I'm just going to click Start the Activity, and it will take me into the assignment and allow me to begin. So that's how you will log in to Desmos using Google. Let's take a look now at the Graphing Linear Inequalities Part 4 assignment. Our assignment begins with the learning goals and success criteria. If we scroll down, there's a link here that takes us to the Desmos activity. Go ahead and click on that link, and it should take us to a page that looks like this. We'll go ahead and click Start the Activity. It has our learning goals and success criteria here. We're going to go ahead and click Next. And it gives us a series of linear inequalities to graph on the graphs here. So the first one says graph y is less than x. Well, I can see that my y-intercept, there is none listed, so it's 0. So I'm going to go ahead and plot that point. And there's no slope in front of the x, but there is one x there, so that means the slope is 1. So I'm going to go up 1, over 1, and plot my point. And then I'm going to connect the dots. So I'm going to use the line tool here and click on this point and connect it to this point here. And I'm going to do the same thing in the other direction from this point through the other one, just like that. Now there is no way to do a dotted line, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the text box to state that this is going to be a dotted line. So I just put that it's a dotted line. I'm going to leave that right here. Now from that I need to do my shading. So it says y is smaller, so I want all the y's that are smaller than this line. So here's this line, and I'm going to go below it, so I should be shading everything over here. So I'm going to use my pen tool and just kind of do some squiggles here to show that this area is shaded. You do not need to fill the whole thing in, just enough to show me that you know where we're shading. And then we'll go down and do the next one. Next one says y is greater than or equal to negative x. So again, I'm going to plot my y-intercept first. My y-intercept in this case, there is none. So it's 0. And my slope doesn't exist, right? I don't have one, but there's a negative 1x there. So that means that my slope is negative 1. So I'm going to go down 1, right 1, and plot my point. Now I'm going to use my line tool to connect the dots. So I'm going to click on this point and drag it through the other point, just like that. And I'm going to do the same thing in the other direction. I'm going to click on this point and drag it through this one. And there's my line. Now, this one, they did add something extra, so I am too. So I'm going to put that this one is a solid line. And now I just need to figure out where to shade. So it says y is bigger than this line. So I'm going to go to the line and see where my y's are bigger along the y-axis. Well, they're bigger up here. So I'm going to use my pen tool and just kind of do some shading up here to show that I am shading this area. And then I'll click Next. And it'll give me 2 more inequalities to draw in. And I'll continue to do that. I'll answer each of them. And when I get to the last slide and finish that up, I'll go back to my Google form. You'll click Next, and that'll send you to your Before You Go. Once you're done with your Before You Go, you can submit your work on Google Classroom.